Earlier this week, ESPN made the decision to suspend one of its anchors, Jemele Hill, over the fact that she violated their social media policy and shared her political opinion on Twitter. Now, for those of you who might have missed it, here's the reason why she got suspended.
These tweets included, here you go, Jerry Jones also has created a problem for his players, specifically the black ones. If they don't kneel, some will see them as sellouts. She goes on, if you strongly reject what Jerry Jones said, the key is his advertisers don't place the burden squarely on the players. And then in this whole string, she later clarifies some of her comments, tweeting this: just so we're clear, I'm not advocating an NFL boycott, but an unfair burden has been put on players in Dallas and Miami with anthem directives.
So, of course, she is responding to or commenting on the fact that Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones said that he would not tolerate any of the players on the team kneeling during the national anthem. He said that he would bar them from playing if they did so. And, Hill reports on sports, and this has to do with sports, and I don't think she said anything particularly controversial, but whatever. ESPN decided, hey, she's violating our social media policy. Now, she gets suspended, and of course, the man-child that we have as president decided to chime in because there are no other important issues for him to focus on. Early morning tweets about people who have hurt his feelings are way more important. So his tweet said the following: with Jemele Hill at the mic, it's no wonder ESPN ratings have tanked. I don't know why tanked is in quotation marks. Is it because he knows that tanked is not the right way to describe it? I don't know. In fact, tanked so badly, it is the talk of the industry. He doesn't really ever talk about his ratings because his ratings are doing very, very poorly. Around 40% approval rating.
And he's also not a man of substance, so he doesn't care if you're right or wrong. He just cares, are you rating well or are you not rating well? And of course he's wrong about this. So ESPN has issues. It has absolutely nothing to do with Jemele Hill. They've lost 12 million subscribers in the last 12 months. Why? People are cutting their cable packages. What is the #1 channel on all of the cable bundles? ESPN. So they're the tip of the spear for the cable industry. So they lose the most amount of subscribers when people cut their cable cord and they don't subscribe anymore. So the rest of the cable also loses subscribers, but not as many as ESPN because they're not in as many homes. That is why ESPN, and I told you about this years ago when they started firing a lot of their hosts. They were like, oh, Bill Simmons said the wrong thing, Keith Olbermann said this. No. They had to throw salaries overboard because they started losing so much money because of the dynamic of the industry having nothing to do with those hosts or what they're putting on air. So, but Trump, of course, is way too unintelligent to understand or care about the industry dynamics. You wouldn't know it if it slapped him across the face. He's like, the ratings bad, they must be wrong, and it must be because of the person who criticized me. Preposterous.
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised at all that he's intentionally misleading about what's really going on with ESPN and its ratings. To me, that's not even the most important part of the story. The important part of the story here is that we have the President of the United States punishing someone's speech. That is not allowed. That is not allowed based on the First Amendment of our Constitution. Okay, so this is outrageous. Look, if private citizens want to criticize her, of course that is fair. They're allowed to do that. If ESPN wants to suspend her, they are not funded by the government. They are not a government entity. They have all the right in the world to suspend her, even though I disagree with their decision to do so. But the President of the United States cannot push for punishments toward people who exercise speech that he disagrees with. He is a man-child. He is literally the top snowflake in this country, probably internationally. He cannot handle any type of criticism whatsoever. And why is he so hyper-focused on nonsense like this?
You know why? I'll tell you why.
This tweet happened at 3:42 in the morning.
No, you guy's a lunatic.
Go to sleep.
Okay, no, I'll tell you why. Why is he obsessed with black players kneeling? Why is he obsessed with Jemele Hill? You know why? It's because of what Jemele Hill said before. He's a white supremacist. He is. In his bones, he's racist through and through. That's why not only did he not believe that Obama was a US citizen, he demanded his college transcripts because he thought, how could a black guy get good grades at Columbia and Harvard? He's deeply racist. That is his assumptions. Central Park 5, we've been over all this stuff. Guys who didn't do it, he's like, who cares? They should rot in jail anyway. They're black. What difference does it make? So Jemele Hill gets under his skin because she's pointing out what he is. He's a racist monster. That's why he hates those black players who are protesting police abuse. And so I like that some of the other on-air people at ESPN are fighting back.
Yeah, they are fighting back. Some of her colleagues have tweeted in support of Hill, and I appreciate them for doing it because you never know, they might get suspended over this. Josina Anderson says, stop attacking our colleague Jemele Hill. Any other journalists or media entities, we are doing our work. So I want to stop there for a second because I want those on the right who can't handle anyone criticizing your dear leader to imagine the shoe on the other foot. Imagine Obama pushing for punishments against someone like Sean Hannity. I mean, first of all, we would condemn him for that. And you would definitely condemn him for that, as you should, because that is a violation of the Constitution. In this case, Trump's doing it, and the right wing is like, yeah, whatever, yeah, she should get fired.
They don't believe in freedom of speech at all. So he tells them that they should shut up, the players, now Jemele Hill, and you applaud him. Look, as Anna pointed out, ESPN can do anything they want, and when it comes to their advertisers, they get even touchier, okay? But when the president is pressuring ESPN or the Cowboys or the NFL to fire people or not pay them or suspend them, that is a constitutional issue. And if you care about the freedom of the speech and the freedom of the press, you should be outraged. And if you're not outraged, just stop pretending you care about the First Amendment or the Constitution. If you like this video, you'll love the whole TYT network. Check it out at tytnetwork.com/join.